Yeah, I think
called The 3 R's of Baseball, or The 3 R's of Ogden, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it was about the 3 R's being Robinson as in Frank Robinson, Ricky as in Ricky Henderson, and R as in Raptors.
Right.
So I just found it to be a really, really fascinating documentary. Well done, by the way.
Thank you.
And if it was scripted, whoever did the scripting did a great job. And a very educational process. And being the background that we have and being the local baseball team, I wanted to talk about it a little bit more. So here we are.
Awesome.
So let me ask Katie the first question. Katie, you're with the Weber County Heritage Foundation.
That's right.
And the documentary was done through the foundation.
Yeah. And
So whose idea was it, and how long did it take to put together?
Well, it was during the depths of COVID, and so we couldn't have any in-person events. But we were scheduled to have our annual meeting where we just celebrate some aspect of Weber County history. And I've known John for years, took a class from him way back in the day, and then we have been colleagues at Weber State for decades and office buddies. So
Decades?
Actually, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I called him up.
Wait a minute. I mean, it couldn't be decades because you look like you're about
Good.
25 years old.
Good. Thank you. No, I guess I'm a lot older than.
You'd have to be
It's
unless you were
Jersey, I don't
Doogie
know.
Howser or somebody.
No. So I called up John, and knowing that he is such a great sports historian and storyteller, I said, we got to get you to talk about baseball history. And we had the event on Zoom, so we could actually have a lot of photographs, historical photographs, as he was speaking. And just posted it to YouTube. And to this day, it is by far our most viewed video of
Now,
all our videos.
We're live right now, so we can't show clips, in the background of the documentary. But if somebody wanted to go check it out on YouTube, how would they find it?
Yeah, I think you could. It's on our Weber County Heritage Foundation YouTube channel. But I think you could just Google the 3 R's of Ogden baseball. Yeah, and it comes right up.
Yeah.
A lot of great photos to go with the stories.
If you folks haven't seen it, you need to go to it and watch it out. Now, when we post this on all our platforms after we're done, hopefully Kevin might be able to put a link to it or show some clips in the background, and we'll get going. Now, John, you're not just a historian, but you're a sports historian too. So tell us, when Katie contacted you about being involved in this and how you wanted to approach it, and obviously your know-how was the driving force of the whole documentary. So give us a little insight.
Thanks. I'm not an Ogden native. I'm a Salt Lake boy.
Uh-oh.
I first met Dave Baggett when he played for Salt Lake many years ago.
God, really?
Yeah, and then was the general manager the next season, and I had season tickets there, and they were the best seats in the park. They were right by the Trappers dugout. And one day Holly said to me, "How in the hell did you get these seats?" And I said, "Pure luck." And we had them the whole time.
Aluminum folding chairs.
Aluminum folding chairs. And we had them the entire time from 86 actually. We missed 1 year. 86 until they left in 92.
Yeah.
So my interest was in Salt Lake baseball. I grew up 3 blocks away from Dirks Field, as it was then. Used to go to the ball games all the time. Spent my 6th grade at Dirks Field mostly, and have been interested in baseball history. When I came to Ogden to teach at Weber State, which was in the 70s, I got interested a little later, and unfortunately I didn't see a lot of Ogden baseball until the Raptors time, but I was aware of it. In those days, the biggest rivalry in the Pioneer League really was between Ogden and Salt Lake.
Oh, yeah.
And if we could get another Ogden-Salt Lake rivalry, I think it'd be great. Probably not going to happen right away. But and when the Reds would come to Salt Lake, boy, that would be a big game. When the Bees would go to Ogden, that'd be a big game. And so I was aware of Ogden baseball, but more interested in writing about living through Salt Lake baseball. But when I came to teach in the history department, I said to them one day, "What about a sports history class?" And they said, "Why not?" Well, I didn't know what a sports history class was. So I just taught American history using sports instead of other things. And we would feature baseball most, because I mostly know baseball. So that's how I got my interest. And over the time that I was there, I began to understand how important that was to this community. And the number of really significant ball players that came through
Right.
Ogden. When it was a Reds franchise, when it was a Dodgers franchise, and both times under Lasorda and then later with the Raptors.
It's interesting you say that. We just had a couple who were outside the stadium taking pictures of our little wall of fame there and all the jersey names and everything we had out there. So I invited them to come in. They were in town from LA for a wedding.
Oh, really?
Wow.
And they were and they were blown away
Yeah.
at the history just of what they saw at Lindquist Field, of the names of people that have come through here. And they had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the history in Ogden is significant.
It is significant.
And nobody knows about
Well, they do now through the
Well,
3 hours of
yeah.
baseball. At least
No,
part
they
of it.
do. And it really goes back to early times. It predates statehood. There were a lot of pickup games and get together at the park games. But as early as 1900, there were actual leagues, the Utah-Idaho Association and the Intermountain League and various leagues, that always had Ogden. And the rivalries were Ogden and Salt Lake, but Ogden and Logan, Ogden and teams in southern Idaho. And players moved around. They'd pitch one day for one team, and 2 days later, under a different name, they'd play third base for another team. And there are not a lot of statistics, and we don't know really who a lot of those players were. But in later periods, Ogden produced some really significant players. Even in the early days, Lefty Gomez, for example, played in the Utah-Idaho League.
I didn't know that.
Didn't-
Lefty
didn't play-
Gomez?
Yeah, didn't play for Ogden. He
Oh,
played for
okay.
Salt Lake.
Okay.
But he played when Ogden and Salt Lake competed.
Well, we can't put him on our wall
I
then.
understand.
No.
No, don't put him
No.
on the wall.
What about not Frank Robinson, Singleton.
Elmer Singleton.
Elmer Singleton,
Elmer
yeah.
Singleton.
That's a name I don't know.
Well, you should know Elmer Singleton. He was from, I think he was actually born and lived a lot in Plain City.
Yeah.
Mostly a career minor leaguer, but a pitcher, but he had up and down with various major league teams, all from the late 30s into the late 50s.
And when did he play for Ogden?
I'm not sure he ever played in Ogden, but he came out of Plain City. He
Ah.
may
Came
have
out
played
of
some.
the Farm League.
Yeah, and Katie knows about that. Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that Farm Bureau stuff. that's going on.
The Farm Bureau was the biggest Weber County league that was formed in the 20s. So it must have been in the 20s that he got his start. Elmer Singleton is just this kid from Plain City, but he was this red-hot right-handed pitcher.
Yeah.
And eventually played 24 seasons in the minors and 7 in the majors.
24
Yeah.
years in the minors?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So he
he's a
was like the
local
Tom
legend.
Brady of minor league
Yeah,
baseball.
he's a really big Plain City. He's a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder if Plain City has any historical significance of him.
I wonder.
I don't know, but baseball was always significant in Plain City. I don't know whether it was in the water or what, but they always had a lot of activity out there.
Well, we still have a lot of fans come
Sure.
from Plain City.
I'm sure.
Some season ticket holders and whatnot. In fact, 63% of all our fans come from outlier communities outside of Ogden,
Really.
which is great for the Ogden, tax base.
Sure.
We're
Yeah.
bringing in this outside money into the Ogden community, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, again, I want to remind all the viewers out there, if you would like to submit a question, please do so. We'll ask John or Katie or both how it applies, and we have one right now from Dino Miconi, who is a season ticket holder. Hi, Dino. Thanks for tuning in. And he has a question for John.
Yes.
And we'll ask Katie the same question, but John first. What is the most memorable baseball memory for you? Also, let's make it twofold. You grew up in Salt Lake, so give us a Salt Lake answer and then give us a local Ogden answer.
Okay. For Salt Lake, it is when the Raptors, that night when they played that 20.
Oh, the Trappers.
Or Trappers.
The
excuse me.
28th game, yeah.
When they played that 28th game and broke that record. That was just amazing. Sports Illustrated was there. And it was just an amazing moment.
Yeah, I would have to say that's my most Salt Lake memory as well.
And I think they won that game.
Yeah.
And then
One more.
one more. So
Yeah.
it's 29. And then they finally lost.
They got beat up in Billings, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it was on the road. I couldn't
Yeah.
remember it was Billings. So that probably was my most important memory. But growing up as a kid in Salt Lake, we had a guy that played for the Salt Lake Bees named Dick Stewart. And Stewart was an amazing ball player. I can still see those long home runs go out of Dixfield. And so I have two memories. I grew up not far from the park, used to go all the time, and I do remember Stewart. And he got married at Dirks Field at home plate. I don't think the marriage lasted.
But the game goes on.
Yeah, but the game goes on. For me, it's two for also on Ogden. One would be when my son, who was a left-handed relief pitcher, pitched a high school tournament game at Sir Simmons Field. But the other side of that would be when the Raptors came back. And Ogden now had a baseball team after a long.
I think it was like a 13-year layoff.
Or at least,
Yeah.
maybe more. And,
I think the Ogden A's left in 84, correct?
I'm thinking it was 80.
Oh, well, then it would be 14, 15 years, yeah.
Yeah, well, they were only here a couple, maybe it was a little later. But
3 seasons,
Three
yeah.
seasons. You know, it was a long drought. And, yeah, I remember that was a hell of a place to play. I'm sure.
Katie, your fondest memory?
Of baseball?
Yeah, Dino wants to know.
Ooh, it's either got to be my very first minor league game that I went to see the Trappers in Salt Lake. I must have been, 7. I was a massive baseball fan.
What year was it? Because in 86, there was a handsome center fielder that played for him.
Really? I could have seen it.
So how old am I if she was 7?
If it was 86, I was 6. It could have been. Now I gotta find out.
Yeah, right.
I go back through the old family album and find out. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Was it because Dad took you or Mom took you or what was it?
Yeah, and we were super poor growing up, so this was the outing of a lifetime, and we even could afford to get a hot dog. It was like the height of existence. It was just so magical. I can still smell the ballpark. I know you talk about that too. Just the sounds and the sights and the just the look of the field. It was like nothing that I have ever seen before.
Well, here it is 30-something years later, and I can tell you this, that we still do nights at the ballpark where the average fan has the ability to come to the game regardless of their financial situation.
Yes,
and we will always be that way.
I love that. I could not be more thrilled that you guys do that. It really is so fantastic.
Yep.
Well, these are, again, a wonderful question, Dino. Thank you for that. Again, if you have any other questions to ask John or Katie, even myself, please submit them and we'll get the questions asked. I've been given a note for me to try not to pound on the table because it's affecting the sound. So I will thank you, Kevin, for that. I will make sure I keep my hands accordingly. Katie, I will ask you this question. Back to your documentary, The 3 R's.
Yeah.
Where did that concept come from, and who decided to make it Robinson, Rickey, and Raptors?
That was all John.
Okay.
Because I had, in my work with the Heritage Foundation, I had just got snippets of baseball history that there was this farm league and that the first baseball was 1866 in Weber County. Yes. And as a kid, I was like a baseball card collector, I was really into it. But it was I'd always associated early baseball with, Chicago or Brooklyn or, other places other than here. And so it wasn't until I was an adult historian that I connected those two and realized that baseball really was also beginning at the same time right here as early as 1866. So I just had these little snippets and I was so curious to learn more. So I twisted John's arm and made him talk about, I just wanted to hear about baseball history, whether it was through time. I mean, I know in half an hour you can't put everything in, so that's how he figured out how to kind of narrow it down to the 3 R's of Ogden baseball, kind of the past and the present and the future.
Okay, well that takes me to the next. Now it's your turn, John. Katie mentioned about she wanted to learn about the baseball history. Mm-hmm. So those viewing right now, let's learn about it right now. Now, we don't have 34 minutes for a documentary, John, but if you could touch upon the most important levels of baseball in Ogden and the team names and whatnot, and we'll run you through the history of baseball real quick in Ogden specifically. Go ahead.
Well, early on, there were the Ogden Lobsters. Who knows where that came from?
That's my favorite.
What year was that?
1900 to 1903. 1901, 1903.
1901 to 1903. And by the way, folks, we're trying to find artwork or logos. Pretty much, John will tell you, back in those days, they really didn't have cap logos. They had maybe a solid cap that might have had a stripe or two on it, but there was never really any brand identification. So we're going to make something up. We might do a night where it's the Ogden Lobster night at the ballpark and make a jersey and a hat and have some fun, and we'll sell the jerseys off the players' backs or whatever. And I'll even go out and I'll buy a couple hundred lobsters and sell them in the ballpark.
There you go.
So I just love the idea that Ogden had a team called the Lobsters. It's just fabulous.
Well, and they had leagues, the Utah-Idaho League, the Intermountain League, the Utah Intermountain League, and there was a great rivalry between southern Idaho and northern Utah, Salt Lake on up to maybe Pocatello, which is easy to understand. That's kind of Mormon Idaho, if you follow me. And the teams kind of came and went, and mostly after that period, there were a lot of Farm Bureau leagues or semi-pro leagues. But in 1912, 1914, there were the Ogden Gunners, Browning Arm.
Yeah, we understand that.
Easy to understand.
You know, Lindquist, as in Lindquist Field, and my
Yes.
partner, Johnny, they are Brownings. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't. But
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
not
they
surprised.
are Brownings. So there's the connection with baseball again.
Yep. Later, the canners, because
Love that.
canning was a huge industry in Weber and Davis County, so that's where the
And that's what the smokestack is for on Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Lincoln and like 21st or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that was the American Can Company.
Yeah.
was
American Can,
manufacturing the cans
The canning
for all the canneries.
for the produce was grown out and they were in the Utah-Idaho League, which was actually a pretty good league. And the Pacific Coast League would steal the players from the Utah-Idaho League.
Yeah.
And I was mentioning earlier that Lefty Gomez pitched for a while, and then he ended up down in Oakland and went on from there. So Ogden baseball was here, and then there was a kind of a drought until the Pioneer League started. And that started in the late 1930s.
1939.
39, and from 1939 to 56, Ogden was in that Pioneer League. The time off for World War II,
Right.
one thing or another, and then of course came back with the Raptors.
Right.
But that was really a significant minor league. There were good rivalries in that league. They all had major league affiliates. Ogden was the Cincinnati Reds, and except in the midst of the McCarthyism when they became the Cincinnati Redlegs,
Right.
because you couldn't be Reds during that.
Really? That's
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you
Yeah.
couldn't call them the Reds.
No. And, Johnny Temple and a number of other players. The most famous one from that period when they were with Cincinnati was, of course, Frank Robinson.
So there's your first R.
First off, Frank Robinson. And I said to myself, who, out of all that history, are there Hall of Famers? Actually, there are three. I didn't talk about one. Ernie Lombardi played in Ogden, and he came into the Hall of Fame later,
When did he play?
in the 30s.
See, he needs to be on our Wall of Fame.
And I can't, it might have been in the 20s. I'd have to look.
Ernie, boy, I'd like to get that information because
Catcher.
that's a legacy that needs to be preserved.
I'll do a little digging
Okay,
for you.
thank you.
The two that came to mind immediately were Frank Robinson, who played here in 1955, I guess.
54.
Four, and came from Oakland, McClymonds High School in Oakland. And that was an interesting connection because Robinson came. There were two African-American players on that team. Frank and Chico Terry was the other guy. And Robinson did not enjoy his time in Ogden at all. He felt like Ogden was not welcoming to him as an African-American. He was a great ball player. Scouts believed that he was probably, they would say, he's the best pure hitter that ever came to Ogden. But
So
it
you
was
say,
not a happy experience.
based on what you just said, and if you watch the documentary that John and Katie produced, the part on Frank Robinson, you will see that he did state that he felt that he suffered from a few instances of racism,
Yeah,
which
he did.
is not something we're proud of.
No.
But
no. But he performed well. He had a great season and moved on. I happened to run into Robinson many years later at a fall league game. And I said to him, Mr. Robinson, I'm from a town you might remember. He said, where's that? I said, Ogden, Utah. And he kind of smiled a little bit, and I said, you know, it's a different town than when you were there. Got a great stadium, got a great team. You ought to come back and see us sometime. And he said, maybe I will. I don't know that he ever did, but I wanted him to know that he was held by high regard by a lot of people.
Well, and high regard by us as a Raptors franchise, because, you know, even today we can only continue forth on the legacy that others built for us.
Absolutely.
And Frank Robinson, and I got to meet him even when I was playing. I mean, he was a man of many firsts.
Oh, yeah.
Including being the first African-American manager of a Major League Baseball team. Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine some of the obstacles he had to face.
Yeah.
And, you know, he overcame them, and he overcame them voraciously and became the Hall of Famer that everybody knows him. And his passing was saddened.
It was because he was a great baseball player, but he was a great baseball person.
Yeah.
And fulfilled so many different roles as a baseball player. And I don't want to suggest that everybody in Ogden didn't like Frank Robinson. My heck, the newspaper is full of all kinds of praise for Robinson. They realized that he was a great ball player. But those were the 1950s, and you know, times have
It's funny you say that, because even today I can tell you when you get a player that for some reason is going to be a little bit more special than the rest of them, and a lot of times with the hitters, it's based on the sound of the ball coming off the bat.
Yes.
It just comes off the bat different.
Yes.
With a little bit more force and a little bit more of a popping sound, and you just know this guy is built to play.
And the scouts would say that about Robinson.
When he was playing here, was it at John Affleck Park?
It was at John Affleck Park.
Now let's back up a little bit to the Gunners and the Canners. I believe they played at a park at the mouth of the canyon. Is that correct?
Well, they played a couple of places. They played a park called Glenwood Park. Yeah. And Glenwood Park was at 27th between Washington and Grant.
I'd never heard of that.
And Lauren Farr was 1600 Gramercy. That's the one you're thinking of. It was later called Reddy Kilowatt.
Reddy Kilowatt, yeah.
And it was in the canyon. And there are wonderful stories of the wind coming down and blowing pictures off.
Oh, they blew the fences over twice a night,
all kinds of stories.
I live right there, and I could tell you those winds still blow every morning and night.
Yeah, I don't think it ever blew a picture off the mound, but it's a good story.
Yeah. So, okay, so now let's fast forward again. We've gone through the Ogden Reds. They departed somewhere around 56, I think.
56 was last season.
And then who came in after that?
Well, the Ogden Dodgers come back in the late 60s.
66, I think, was the first year.
And they're managed by a name that most people remember, Tommy Lasorda.
Yeah.
And that was a great, great ball club. And he was a great manager.
For 3 years.
For 3 straight.
Actually, the Ogden Dodgers, Tommy had the team in 66, 67, and 68.
Right.
And then in 69, I think the manager was a guy named Malgrady or whatever, and he actually won it in 69.
Right.
So it's the only team in the history of the Pioneer League since it was formed in 39 that has actually won the league title 4 consecutive years in a row. The Salt Lake Trappers did it 3 years in a row. But Ogden did it for 4, and that's still a record that holds today.
Well, and that's a good point. And most of us forget, because as soon as Tommy left, we kind of, but yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, I think they were here through 70 or 71 or 72.
I'm thinking 71.
Yeah. And
Salt Lake came back into the Pioneer League for a short period of time.
Yeah.
But I think it was after Ogden had left, 71, something like that. And those teams, as you know, were full of all kinds of baseball talent. Steve Garvey, of course, now I can't remember her name, Bill Buckner.
Bobby Valentine, Bill Russell, Charlie Huff. It goes on. You know who else played for the Ogden Dodgers? Former BYU head coach and a good friend, Gary Pullins.
Gary Pullins.
Yeah.
Did you have season tickets then?
No, that was before my time. I was the Salt Lake boy still. Tommy, the raconteur and ambassador of baseball. I heard him speak a million years ago at BYU when Pullins was the coach. And he said, you know, I called Pullins up on the phone the other day, and I said, Gary, do you believe in free speech? And Gary said, of course I do. I mean, he called me and said, Tommy, do you believe in free speech? And I said, of course I do. And Gary said, good, you're going to give one. And when I saw Tom over there, I said, there's a line about you I use all the time, but I always credit you. And I told him the story. He said, "Oh yeah, I remember it." And he really had a great respect for Pullins,
Yeah.
who was very clean cut, hard working, hard playing, but clean cut guy.
I have a lot of fond memories of Tommy when he would come to visit Ogden. He always came once, maybe twice a season.
Yes.
For all those years when we were affiliated with the Dodgers. But most of the stories I can't repeat here. But I can tell you there was one thing I really found amusing. And those of you who are out there who might actually still be playing, especially if you're a pitcher. A young man came up to Tommy after a game when he was holding court after a game one night and having a few adult beverages and a glass of wine or whatever it was. And a young man came up, and I think he was probably 10 years old. And he said, "Mr. Lasorda, can I ask you a question?" And of course, Tommy, "Yeah, sure you can." And so Tommy, not only says, "Yeah," but he puts him on his knee and he says, "All right, I'm your Santa Claus. What's your question?" He says, "How do you hit a good curveball?" And you know what Tommy's answer was? He says, "You can't. You can only hit the bad ones." And it's so profound.
Well, it is profound.
It's profound.
Yeah.
You can't, nobody can hit a good curveball. You can only hit the mistakes.
No, that's right.
So anyway, fast forward through the Dodgers. Then there was a little bit of a break, and then who came next? There was still one more team before the Raptors made it here.
Right, and that was the Ogden A's.
Yeah.
They were here for 3 or 4 years too.
Which brings us to our second
Which
R.
brings us to our second R, which is Ricky Henderson. One of the most interesting players in baseball. And he's somebody that people will use, they'll make almost as a kind of foil. Ricky always talked in the third person.
Right.
Ricky, why do you always talk in the third person? Ricky, don't do that. See? Okay. But he was one of the best pure hitters in baseball history.
Yeah.
And if you go back and look in his high school yearbook, that stance, he had that in high school. That crouch stance that he took to the major.
Most of them do.
Yeah. And he just really was a great ball player in high school and then of course.
He's known for his base stealing prowess.
Right.
But, a lot of people forget. I think he holds the major league record for leadoff home runs.
I believe that's still true.
I think he won a batting title 1 or 2 times.
Sounds right.
Just an incredible athlete who was built like an NFL running back.
Yeah, he was, and maintained that.
Yeah.
I think he could play today.
Yeah, he probably could.
Yeah, but you could tell that when the scouts saw him in high school, they knew that this was going to be
But interesting, Katie, and you could probably help me. True, though, we don't find too many pictures of the Ogden Reds, Ogden A's, excuse me. But when you do find them, you'd swear they were the Ogden Reds because they didn't wear green and gold like the Oakland A's.
They didn't. Yeah.
They wore like Ben Lomond colors, right? Columbia blue and red. Yeah.
Ben Lomond colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Morgan, who was a teammate of Ricky's and a good friend. Mike, if you're out there, hi.
Yeah.
Mike was also, talk about having a great senior year.
Yeah.
Or the last week of your senior career. Mike Morgan went for winning the state title in high school to go into prom, and then a week later pitching in a Major League Baseball game for the Oakland A's as an 18-year-old. Now, after that, he needed to be refined, so they sent him down, and he ended up in Ogden. He still lives up in the valley, I believe. Or he's in the Morgan area, I think. So he's still in the area. In fact, you left a bicycle at the ballpark. Dave, do we still have that mountain bike in storage?
Really?
No.
He left the mountain bike at the ballpark. We finally pawned it, Mike. We got $4 for it. Anyway, so then what's the fondest memory of Ricky Henderson that you might know? Did you ever watch him play in Ogden?
I never saw him play in Ogden because, like I was saying, I was a Salt Lake boy. But I saw him play many, many times in the majors when he played for every team in the major leagues and then again. But the best memory is when he was on his retirement tour. And he was in Milwaukee, and they gave him a Harley. And I had the best seats in the house. I said, I need one ticket. And the person said, do you mind being on TV all night? I said, no, why? Because you are right behind home plate. God's truth. And every time they showed that pitch, there was me. But when they gave Ricky that Harley, they drove it right in, and he was styling, and that's a great memory.
Beaming from ear to ear.
Oh, beaming from ear to ear. And that was quite a retirement tour. That was not
That's
the only
awesome.
swag he got. But,
All right, before we go to the next R, we do have a question. A guy named Dave writes in. And he says, in regards to the players back in the old days, with the Gunners and the Canyons and whatnot, where did they come from at that time, and were they paid to play?
Yeah, they were paid. They were paid. It's very fluid. Most of them were local guys in that early period, the Gunners and the Canners. Now, when you get into the Utah-Idaho League in the late 20s, that's a little different. They were recruiting players, and they had some major league affiliations. But in the early days, a pitcher would pitch for Ogden, say, on a Tuesday, and on a Thursday might pitch for Lewiston under a different name. So they were paid, but they weren't paid a lot. In the industrial leagues, which come in Utah later, teams would be recruited at Kennecott and in the mines in Carbon County. And they would go out and recruit players, give them a job in the mine, and play.
Oh, God. How could you play if you're working in the mines all day?
My family's from Carbon County. They gave them an easy job in the mines. Don't misunderstand.
It's like in college when they said you had to get a job in college. Your job was to turn on the sprinklers. But it turned out they were automated, so that's that type of thing.
That type of thing. But we know so little about who they were. Often in the box score, it's the last name, Baggett, Nelson. Okay, and so it's hard to really do a lot of. The only history that you can do comes from the newspapers, and the newspapers, as you might know, sometimes are not always accurate with things like that.
Well, I mean, whose archives goes back to the 1800s?
Sure. And so it was semi-pro, but enough pro that it was paid.
If they're getting paid, they're pro, baby.
That's right.
Yeah.
Did they get paid like per game, and that's how they could bounce around?
Yeah, and they usually got paid in cash at the end of the game. And like I say, they would go from team. Some of them literally, there were players that would go.
Boy, I could tell you cash stories that would from my Salt Lake days that would spin your head.
Some things never change. Yeah.
The good old days, man.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be an old time purist, but at 61, I have enough history in my head that I've also forgotten a lot of history. But it's just, oh man.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the third R.
Well, the third R is obviously the Raptors, and I feel like I'm the neophyte here when it comes to the Raptors. You know the Raptors' history much better than I do, but I can say, and everyone I think agrees, what you did when you were in Salt Lake, you knew how to market baseball. You knew how to get seats or butts in the seats. Even a year in Pocatello, I saw a Posse's game one time. It was not quite the same, but not bad. But you brought that same enthusiasm and that same sense of making this a family entertainment opportunity in Ogden, and it's had real staying power.
Well, I mean, gosh, John, I'm kind of just touched and honored that you say it the way you said it. I really do appreciate it, and I can tell you that the people I learned from on how to run a professional baseball team are still in my heart and mind today, and many of those same things that we did in Salt Lake we're still doing today.
Yeah.
When people ask us what our age demographic is, we don't have an age demographic. It's 4 to 94. We have many nights where people can still get into the ballpark free. I mean, if you can't go to your local ballpark in your local neighborhood without breaking the bank, then what's the point?
Exactly.
We're supposed to be more an asset to the community than the community is for us. And I think going into our 29th year of existence and 28th season of playing, because COVID wiped us out, we're grateful. I can tell you this, we're grateful for every dollar somebody wants to give us. And also every dollar we spend hurts. Because we have 48 home games. But imagine, I try to put it in perspective to some people who want to talk about why we charge what we charge. And the only way I can tell them to get it to understand is, Katie, what would you charge in your business if you could only be open 48 days a year? It's tough. And if you get a rain out,
Yeah.
The losses start at $10,000 for the night, just in one rainout.
Yep. Yep.
So we don't want rainouts because the doubleheaders are great,
Yeah.
but it's still one day's worth of revenue.
Right.
You've lost it
not
altogether.
Yeah.
But we still will always do nights, and that's why I've got Trevor and Richard and Dave. We're here to let the community know that we're there to serve you. And if we do, all my job is a mission statement, I guess, is we want you to come to one game. If you've never come back, that's my fault.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think that's ever happened.
I would be.
In fact, we still have, and we have many friends that live at the Trio Retirement Center. About 3 or 4 years ago, Trevor? Yeah. We had a woman come in who wanted to buy some vouchers to put in her mom's stocking for Christmas. And she had to be 70 years old. So I can't imagine, how old's your mom?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she said she was 89. And I said, I can't charge you anything. So we came up with a new rule that anybody 80 years of older never has to pay to see the Raptors play. And so we have about how many, 20, 25 season ticket holders that just came in and immediately picked out seats for the whole season. And we're honored to have them.
Keep that rule. I'm getting close.
Yeah, you still got what, about 10 years to go?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But no, I'm honored that you would revere the Raptors the way you've said it. And I'm also proud of it. We can't do it without the community backing it. So we thank the community more than anybody.
Well, and sure, but you have to have a catalyst. And, Serge Simmons had its challenges as a baseball place.
That's politely putting it.
Well, but you got through, and now you have a wonderful stadium. Dirk's had its challenges. I remember when they thought it was going to fall down, and you had those imitation hard hats.
Oh, yeah. If there's a seat, it's safe. That was
that was the slogan. And it was.
That was a ruse. There was nothing wrong with the stadium.
No.
That was their way of trying to justify tearing it down. Yeah. That's a whole nother thing.
Yep.
But sometimes people can turn lemons into lemonade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special
And there's
people.
that famous quote, to understand, I can't remember the guy, philosopher, to understand the American mind, you must understand baseball. They never quote the other part of that, and you must understand it at the local level.
Yeah.
He wasn't talking about baseball on major league level. He was talking about community baseball and minor league baseball and that identity.
I won't get into the reasons why, but some could say that second half of that quote is being lost on the game now.
I totally agree.
And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah.
But not here.
Yeah, but it's a challenge again, being now independent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've lived through that on both sides of that.
Well, in fact, and Trevor, I mean, we when we became an MLB partner league,
Right.
meaning we're independent, and on top of it, at the time, we were still under COVID restrictions on how many people we could put in the ballpark. So we were scratching our heads saying, how are we going to do this? But turned out everything fell into place. Everything lifted, the restrictions locally in Weber County, the health department was awesome. And the players and the coaching staffs, they all came together and they all understood what we were trying to do, including the players. Every day's an audition. And it worked out fabulous. And then coming out of COVID, we didn't know how many people were going to come back.
Right.
And yet we had more, even though we had 10 more games, we had more fans attend the ballpark than ever before. And that about, 156,000 announced attendance? We are now putting things together where we think we're going to get closer to 175.
Really? I think that's doable.
And so if 4,000 a game, it would be unbelievable.
Yeah.
And, eventually I think that the game will change again, as it always does. Although the process changes, the game stays the same.
Exactly.
Although I'm not a fan of some of the changes that are being made, but that's out of my hands.
Yeah.
But the game still is played the way it's supposed to be played. And,
Right.
and we've got a new manager this year, Cash Beecham, and you're going to see a different brand of baseball. We're going to allow analytics to be a part, but we're not going to let it run the club.
Good.
You're still going to bunt in situations where you're supposed to bunt.
Yeah.
If we got to play small ball, we'll play small ball. And sometimes you're going to get beat, and sometimes you just have to tip your hat to the other team and say, well played, we'll get you tomorrow.
That's right.
And that's what baseball is so great versus, say, the NFL. And I love the NFL. But when you lose, in college football or high school football or even any level of football. If you lose, you got to sit on it for a week.
Yes.
In baseball, you just you have to sit on it for one night, and you wake up, the sun comes up, and you start all over again. And that's what's great.
We'll get them tomorrow.
We'll get them tomorrow.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you see the difference in the kinds of players you'll be signing now, and have signed this year, as opposed to 4, 5, 6 years ago, when they would seem to me they were much younger, a lot of Latin players and stuff.
Yeah.
How's that going to change?
Well, for us to be able to put a league together, we're not going to be able to get those young guys because they're still under contract with their major league affiliate.
Right.
We're going to have a couple of Latin players on this year's roster. We didn't last year because we had issues with visa restrictions. Now it's a little bit changed, and we're getting some help there. I think we got one kid from the DR coming and one kid from Canada.
Puerto Rican.
The Puerto Ricans aren't subject to the visa restrictions. But anyway, what we found was, okay, what type of player can we have in our new Major League partner independent league? Yeah. Well, we found that we're going to have to base it on service time and not age.
Correct.
First of all, you can't identify an age in Utah and Montana because that's discrimination.
I did not know.
Oh yeah, so we can't sign a player because he's too old, right?
Not sign a player.
You can't not sign a player because he's too old. So we go on service time. So we came up with now how many players are going to be available based on service time? If the service time is so small, we're not going to find any players because they're still under contract.
Right.
Because the lower the service time, the younger the player is, right? So then that's going to limit us to college seniors. Well, we're starting before the colleges are done.
Right.
So how are we going to get a player to start the season? Yeah. So we came up with where it's currently capped that a player can come to the Pioneer League regardless of age, but as long as he has no more than 3 full years of active service time at any professional level.
At any level.
Even if it's independent or affiliated, it doesn't matter. So it's 45 games for a position player, it's 25 games for a relief pitcher, and I believe it's 10 games for a starting pitcher. Yeah. And so once we get interest from a player, or it's funny, John, we were wondering how are we going to find these guys? They found us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only that, but a lot of them still have agents. Remember, 1,500 kids were released from contraction alone.
Right.
You know, when they contracted the minor leagues from 162 teams down to 120, a lot of kids were out that were, decent ball players were out on the street looking for work.
Yeah.
So they found us, and then you got agents and everything else coming to us, and player development directors and farm directors. They were still reaching out to us to let us know about certain players, and the players also find us. And with social media, they send us video on everything.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing. It's changed it a lot, and yet you're still doing tryout camps.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
we're still going to have our tryout camp in Ogden.
Yeah.
And when is that, Trevor?
May 14th.
May 14th. And why? Because I don't even care if our roster is full.
Right.
If you're the local team and we have total control of what we're doing in regards to players, then I'm going to give every local kid the opportunity to make this club.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And you never know. We might find a sleeping giant out of that. And I want kids to just come to the park and say, I had a chance to make the Ogden Raptors.
Yeah.
I didn't make it, but everybody deserves a shot. And so we're always going to be that way.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And that's been that way for a long time. One of my son's teammates pitched one game for the Raptors.
Who?
Ben Bird.
I remember Ben Bird.
Yeah.
He only pitched in one game?
I think it was only one game.
He must have got hurt because he was talented.
He was. But,
What year was that?
oh, my heck. 92, 3.
No, was it when we were our first 2 years as an independent? Then it would have been 94 or 95.
Oh, no, I'm thinking high school. Yeah, it would have been probably 95.
I could have sworn Ben Bird was in the Dodgers system.
That may be where
Yeah.
you got him from. But it's interesting to me because it's old school and new stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've done research on a guy that played in the majors short period of time, but he was a good minor league player. Played for the Bees and was a good home run hitter. He ended up in baseball because Branch Rickey sent letters to every African American coach in America and said, send me your best players. And he said it cost me a 4-cent stamp. And he would send these letters out, and they would come to camp. unsigned, and George Genovese, a name you might.
Oh, I remember George. He was a scout, long-time scout for the Giants.
One of the great scouts.
Yeah.
He signed this guy, R.C. Stevens, out of Moultrie, Georgia, in a camp for Branch Rickey. That's how that talent came to camp. Now, not everybody signed. Not everybody had the talent. But R.C. did, and that took him out of the segregated South and put him into the middle class.
I could tell you one thing about George. Is if George was alive today, he would tell you, I don't give a rat's you-know-what about spin rate or launch angle.
Right.
I'm judging a kid's mind, and I'm judging his heart. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that's been lost in the game today.
Yeah. A lot of that's been lost. And see, I knew him as a player-coach for the Bees.
Wow.
In 1959.
Wow.
Where
All
he
right,
was
folks,
teammates.
we could go on forever. How long have we been going, Kevin?
46 minutes.
46 minutes. So we'll do a couple more minutes because, we want people to come to the post the next following days and watch the whole thing instead of tuning out after 20 minutes. But,
I got a question for you, Dave.
oh,
Can the public come and see the tryout camp?
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's, we're doing it May 14th at 10 a.m. It's open to the public. Here's something else that you'll enjoy, Katie. Somebody asked me or reminded me, said, did you know that the movie A League of Our Own is celebrating its 30th anniversary on July 1st?
Oh.
They said, why don't you guys have a game that night? Why don't you go ahead and play the movie out on the video board after the game and let the fans go sit on the... I said, that's a great idea, but
brilliant.
we could do one better, and we are. So
What?
on July 2nd, we're actually going to have 2 women's teams play baseball.
Really?
Free to the public. Also on July 11th, we're having tryouts. When is the tryouts? He'll get to the tryout. But we're not going to have the uniform dresses like they wore in the movie. We want to play a serious game. So we put the word out to all the gals. 16 you can't be younger than 16. I don't care how old you are. We're going to have tryouts. We're going to put 2 player teams together. They're going to have jerseys. John, you'll appreciate this, and so will the Heritage Foundation. One of the teams will be called the Whoopee Girls to pay honor to the ambassadors of the Ogden, Pioneer Days Rodeo.
Perfect.
We haven't named the second team yet.
Ah.
The players will get to keep their jerseys. It's going to be free to the fans, and then we're doing another game on July 11th in conjunction with the Triple Crown national softball program that is having their 10 and under and 12 and under softball tournaments right here in Weber County. And they're going to have a parade downtown, and it's going to end up at the ballpark on July 11th, and then we're going to bring out the girls. They're going to play another game, and then we're going to do fireworks after the game. So it's going to be the tryout is when?
June 11th.
June 11th. So why don't you come try out?
Okay, ladies, everybody go.
So ladies,
check
if you can play baseball, I want this to work so much, John and Katie, that if it's successful, I'll put together a 4-team league for next year. And when the
Yes.
Raptors go on the road, we'll still use the park.
That's
Why not?
brilliant.
Because I had
love
to give
it so much.
the Raptors is a give and take operation. You give us your money, and I'll take it.
Yeah,
There you go. Anyway,
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
How about lobsters for the other?
Yeah, I was
team?
going to say, why not make them the last?
that would be
Gunners,
cool, huh?
The Gunners.
The lobsters.
Gen-
I don't
Yeah,
think
you're
I don't
right,
think
you're
you could do gunners in today's
No,
environment.
You're
Probably
right.
couldn't do
Lobsters are innocuous.
Everybody
They
loves a
go
lobster.
Who doesn't love a lobster?
Yeah.
Except the lobster.
Plus the mascot would just be so great.
Yeah, I would.
Okay. We want everybody to thank everybody for tuning in. I have one more question for each of them before we go, but I want to remind you to make sure you check out their documentary. I think, Kevin, can you post that later for us? And of course, you can go to the Weber County Heritage Foundation and check it out through their YouTube channel. And it's the 3 R's of baseball in Ogden. It's so heartwarming and educational, and I just love that the Heritage Foundation decided to post a little bit about not only Weber County's history, but using baseball to make that connection. So I thank you for that. But I also wanted to let people know that this broadcast has been brought to you by 2 of our sponsors. That's Ace Hardware, both in North and South Ogden, and our friends at America First Credit Union. So we'd like to thank them for allowing us to do this broadcast. And I'm going to ask Katie first. Actually, I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to ask John first, because if I ask you first, he's going to have the time to think about it. And I want to throw him on the spot. So here, we'll do John first. So here's the question. If you were to choose any man or woman or anybody in the history of the world that you could sit down and have lunch or dinner with, who would you pick? And why?
And why? This will sound a little weird.
No?
Alan Alda.
No kidding.
Yeah. I think he has the most interesting mind. You see him on the Science Channel stuff. But he is one of those people that just can engage anything. You could ask him a question and say, what do you think about? And he would know something about it. Now, there are a million people. I'd love to talk to Branch Rickey. Tell me about signing Robinson. You know, I'd like to talk to others like that. But if I could have a conversation with somebody and could really have a conversation.
Well, Alan Alda's still with us. You
He's
should
still
reach
with
out
us.
to him.
Hey.
Yeah, well, I don't have any connections, but a fascinating guy.
Well, Katie can help find him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Katie, who's your person?
Mine's very different, but similar, I guess, because I'm so intrigued. I want to hear his thoughts on a particular topic. And he's pretty obscure. Immanuel Kant, Prussian philosopher from the 1700s.
Yeah.
But the reason I want to have a conversation with him is because he was a part of this Enlightenment movement, and he posed this idea 250 years ago that if you give a people freedom, you give them liberty, then they will become enlightened. And he said it wasn't going to happen overnight. It would take, he said, about 250 years. And then right after he posed that idea, the American Revolution happened. And that was about 250 years ago. So the people were given liberty. 250 years has passed. I really want to bring him back from the dead and say, what do you think? Are we enlightened?
That could be a whole nother show.
Yeah, it could be.
Because there's many people are,
Yeah.
there's actually people out there who would disagree with that statement today.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
That's why it's so interesting. I just really want to know what his take. I want
Immanuel
to
Kant?
Kant.
Yeah.
Kant.
Kant.
Yeah.
I'm going to do some reading on
He was
it.
fascinating.
I can guarantee you, if we do this show for another 10 years,
Yeah.
and I ask every guest that question, that name will not come up
Yep.
again. So
That's
we're
why
going
she's
to have to
a better historian than I am.
find out his favorite number, and we'll put a jersey on the Wall of
Okay.
Fame for him. Immanuel Kant, K-A-N-T. Folks, we've been with Katie Holmes from the Weber County Heritage Foundation and his Katie Nelson, Katie Holmes,
And John Travolta.
because it's written here again. Katie, I'm so sorry.
It's fine.
Normally we don't give our guests anything for being on the show, but we'll have to. I'll let you plug your shirt and the hats you're still selling through the
Hey,
foundation.
Thanks. Yeah, we just when we did this documentary with John, we just got so excited about the Ogden Reds that we made some replica shirts and Ogden Red caps. And gosh, I think we only have a few
Yeah,
left.
they sold well.
Yeah, they've kind of been
so
flying off the
Get them while you
shelves.
can.
And the money goes to the foundation,
Yeah,
right?
straight to historic
How much were the hats for?
$20.
Okay.
$20.
You come see us, and I'll give you some of our hats that you can also sell and raise
Awesome.
money for the foundation.
Okay, would love that.
That's the least we can
deal.
do to participate. Again, Katie Nelson, John Silito. Yeah, I always say that because I remember his name because I always envision like a big toe that can tell jokes, a silly toe.
Silly toe.
So there you go. He's heard that 1,000 times.
That's the first time I've heard that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
On behalf of Trevor, Dave, and Richard, and Kevin, and our guests, John and Katie, I'm Bags, and we remind you when you think Raptors baseball to live on. And until next time, ciao, baby.